Hello and welcome to Sami Parvez show. Today I am joined by Dennis Wilson, the candidate for the People's Party of Canada in this Toronto St. Paul's by-election. Mr. Wilson holds PhD and is a businessman. Thank you so much, Dennis, for joining me this morning, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah. Good.
So could you please tell me what inspired you to run in this Toronto St. Paul's by-election?
The by-election itself, I really look at it as the opportunity came my way. It's been a gift to me in a manner of speaking. But something that one of my primary motivators for getting me more actively involved in the campaign and the party and politics in general was going back to the truckers' convoy. And the particular aspect of that was when I woke up one morning listening to the news and found out that the government was in the process of shutting down bank accounts on people that could have been just simple, innocent donors. And the government shutting down bank accounts. And I don't know if you've thought about it a lot or how many of the people out there have thought about it a lot. But when bank accounts start getting shut down, that's an extremely onerous thing to put on an average citizen. They can't get groceries. They can't get their mortgage paid. They can't pay their utilities. It's truly an abuse and an enslavement of the population. And that to me was just absolutely wrong. In that context, they may have had the Emergencies Agreement, Emergencies Act, and that may have given them the power, but the discretionary use of something that impactful, I think they went way off base. And I certainly am not pleased with the government support that went along with shutting down those bank accounts.
Yeah, and also federal court called it unconstitutional for invoking that Emergency Act.
And there's been further judicial aspects of that. But again, I'm not pleased. And something that I've promoted ever since that happened. And I think the Emergencies Act is a good piece of legislation. I think it's a necessary piece of legislation to protect the country. I like the aspect that it requires a report to be delivered to Parliament within a year. Where I think the Emergency Act misses, and where I think we'd get more discretion out of the Parliament, is if there was a requirement for a referendum after the report was released to Parliament, if there was a referendum asking the Canadian people whether they wanted Parliament to be dissolved or whether they wanted to cheer the government for a job well done in protecting the country. So I think bringing it back to the people in the end is an amendment to the act that I think would make it much better for the Canadian population.
You think after this Emergency Act, which was it was invoked by Liberal and NDP support, like they just brought it up, then they just dismiss it. And after dismissing and after that report coming up, you believe they are supposed to be a referendum, right?
I believe there should be. It is not part of the legislation. I feel there is a need to amend the legislation that would allow there to be a referendum that would determine where the people could determine whether or not they felt the government had done a good job or not done a good job. But and I think it's critical. I think it would the seriousness of the event is something that I think does need to be taken back to the people so that people can express themselves and their view of the government.
So do you think those vaccine mandates were valid as PPC leader Maxim Bernier himself, like he refused him and he got arrested in Manitoba for being in a rally and also in Saskatchewan, and he was also fined. So do you believe those vaccine mandates were valid? Did you support them?
I don't think that the government used the proper discretion.
Mhm.
So, from a very literal and factual perspective, uh, he did go against the Emergencies Act. Any other aspect of it, I don't think we will really know. But again, I do believe that if the citizens were able to express themselves after the invocation, after the report, the government will use more discretion up front. If the government was faced with the aspect of, if I do this without proper discretion, without proper guideline, without meeting the guidelines of the Emergencies Act, then they would say, "Oh, geez, I don't know if I want to go that far and actually invoke the act and be accountable for it." Or they would be in the position where they say, "Yes, we really need to do this, and the Canadian people will cheer us for securing the country."
Mhm. Thank you. So right now you are door knocking. What are you hearing from the residents of Toronto, St. Paul, respectively with respect to that Emergency Act? Are you hearing something regarding that?
Um, yes, I don't have a measure of how much for and how much against, but I'm hearing both sides. I'm hearing people that feel that the government enacting the Emergencies Act was a very good thing to do, and I'm hearing from people that were equally upset as I am about the locking down of bank accounts and the lack of further discretion on that aspect of it. So I'm hearing both sides from the constituents.
Okay, thank you. So let's come talk about if we are talking about liberal government, there is another thing is coming up right now, like maybe you heard about it. NCCOP report, National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliament report. There are multiple MPs are colluding with foreign powers. How do you see this one? Or what's your reaction?
I can see in some context that there would be a need for security on some aspects of Parliament and government, but I'm also concerned that too often the government and the legislation permits our Parliament not to be accountable for what is happening. And again, I'm a person that really, really strongly believes in the will of the people.
Mhm.
And if, um, again, I think that there should be a mechanism whereby the government can be absolutely forced to disclose some information that they're not disclosing at this point in time. I think it's an issue with the process and the mechanisms that are in place. And I strongly object to the lack of being able to hold people accountable in Parliament. And the mechanism through what they do that is by denying the people information. So I think we need to create an avenue whereby we can absolutely get information from Parliament.
So do you think those names should be public? Those MPs or senators are colluding with foreign actors.
But again, I feel fairly strongly that we need a mechanism to absolutely get some information. We should be in control of our affairs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the question of, again, uh, does do we work for Parliament or does Parliament work for us?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we should be the final reporting block. We should know.
Thank you so much. And as your party, PPC, from day one, it's against of immigration. Maybe not against of immigration, but yes, mass immigration. So what are your points on mass immigration?
I've been watching immigration for several years now, and being a person who basically made his living in the high tech industry, and one of the early questions or things that I faced was a question of artificial intelligence and expert systems, and also robotics. So I've been aware of AI for 30, 40 years. It was something that I was looked at and worked on when I was a fairly young person in the business world. I have no doubts about it. I made a living by building software that replaced people on the job. So whenever I look at the immigration situation and the arguments put forward in Canada that we need more people to increase our GDP, I always question how fast is AI going to be taking up jobs. Farms that used to maybe employ 16 farm workers now record just one person on a big tractor farming a large piece of land. I believe the auto manufacturers here may be employed as many as 23,000 workers at one point in time, and now that same automobile plant is employing 1,600 workers. Automation, expert systems, robotics are impacting the labor market more than I think we're giving them consideration for. Yes, we need people to some extent to build out our infrastructure and increase our GDP, but do we need them all? And one of the indications that we've gone overboard is as GDP goes up, does productivity go down? And that basically means that there's excess capacity in the labor market, and it's not being taken up by improving GDP itself. It's actually, well, Canada has been suffering from lower productivity for a number of years now. And that tells us that we've exceeded our capacity to put more people to work. And all this we're taking on is more burden. I'm also very concerned about the issue with the students that have come into the country over the last couple of years. I don't object to them being here. I do object to them disappearing and going into the underground economy to some extent. But something that's come up that I'm most concerned about is that these students have been encouraged to come into Canada on false premises, on the suggestion that they would be able to get student loans when they got here, that they would have jobs when they got here. And it's just not true. I was employing a summer student last summer, and I was getting calls from students, immigrant students, that were probably living over 100 kilometers away from the place for the work. And there was no way that they could afford to commute to work. And I recognized that these people were in desperate situations. They had no money, they had no resources left, and they were really desperate. A real estate person that I know and has done advised me of situations that she's faced. She has made a particular interest of trying to help some of these students find living accommodations. And she worked fairly long with a homeowner, convincing him that it would be okay to rent his house out to students. And they had agreed on 8 students to live in the house. And 2 weeks later, he phoned up the real estate agent and said, we agreed to 8 students. He says, I have 15 living in the house. Another just terrible thing that she shared with me, as she's kind of been working intimately with the students, the foreign students, was that a number of them, really to me, an unwarranted number of them, she suggested maybe one a day, are committing suicide because the situation for them is just overwhelming. So the future, really does say, hey, let's stop and let's take a look at what we're doing, because this is impacting people's lives. This is a serious, very serious situation, and it's a big issue today, even as we're speaking. things are out of control and they need to be taken care of. They need to be embraced and pursued, because it's not a good situation. It's not. We have people. That's something that I did come across when I was out knocking on doors, was people that are saying, I'm going back. I'm going to leave this country. This country's crazy, is what they're telling me. So, no, it's something that's out of control. It's poorly planned. It's not doing what it was supposed to, intended to do. It's been a failed exercise, a terribly failed exercise.
Okay, thank you. So do you think all responsibility should be held on liberal government, because they change all the policies? They just just without any background check. Right now, just the Minister of Immigration did not confirm that. Means there were no background checks to get these students in Canada. And maybe you saw some, there were some, last time there were around 700 students who said they were fraud victims to brought in, because they were in fake, they got admission in fake colleges. Those colleges maybe does not exist. They just took a way to get in Canada. So do you believe these all should we blame just liberal government for this?
One of the things that I've been asking constituents as I've gone around talking to them was, I think, a fairly revealing question. I can ask any of them. Is Canada, as you know it today, as you're experiencing it today, is it better than yesterday? Is Canada now better than it was a year ago? Is Canada now better than it was 5 years ago? Is Canada now better than it was 10 years ago? And they will all answer, no, they do not believe Canada is better today than it was at any time in the past. And where we are today has been certainly the product of the Liberal government to a very, very large extent. But if you go back 9 years, the population was every bit as upset over the Harper government. And they voted the Harper government out and the Liberals in, wanting to change things, wanting to make things better. So things went from a bad situation to a worse situation. I don't think the answer to the problem is to employ more bad situation. I think that there is need for remedial activity on the process, on the way we handle things. And I strongly believe that that will come from allowing greater people input into the system and by more direct response to the needs of the citizens, rather than pursuing some philosophical end goal, such as a more conservative government, a more liberal government. It's nice to have the philosophy as maybe a guiding ideal, but I think that the real nature of the country is a projection of the people in the country. And if we're going to service the people in the country, we need to service them where they're at, not where we wish they'd be.
Okay, thank you. So do you think those students right now protesting, they just their maybe work permit got expired, or they have done with their schools or colleges or university, they finished this degree for the purpose they came in? Should they be deported because they are asking to let us stay here? And maybe you heard about their protest in Prince Edward Island and Brampton and some other places across the country.
As I mentioned before, the problem that we have as a result of immigration is a problem we have created. And it is a problem today, and it is a problem that needs to be addressed today. It's a very difficult decision. All the specific access to solving the problem I couldn't say, but I do believe in our ability to address the situation and in some fashion. I am a strong advocate and proponent of free speech. I think we need to be talking more. We need to be free to express our honest opinions and our true feelings about things. And I also am in favor of a very well-practiced legal environment. So I believe that the laws of today should be brought to bear. I don't like the laws that have been proposed that would cut into our freedom of speech and make things illegal that should not be illegal. I don't see the need for some of the legislation as it's coming about. And I feel that if the legislation is wrong, if what we're doing is not humane treatment to people, and I think we've been a little bit short on humanity in the past. If what we're doing is not humane, I think we should be adjusting so that we can do humane things and also do the best that we can for the people of the country.
Okay, thank you. So, so government is yeah, the catch and release system, like it is being ongoing. Like people are being arrested, then they were released on bail because of poor legislation. Do you think there should be a structured legislation to put these criminal behind the bars?
We have indulged in some incredible human experiments, as I'll label them, and they're failed human experiments, and they're terribly detrimental to the people and to the country. One of the ones that I've happened to research and know a little more about is back in the 80s, and this has been discussed by Jordan Peterson. Back in the 80s, there was a movement to move people out of psychiatric institutions and put them in the general community. And it was believed that it would be good for them and healthy and for them. And it was believed that if they kept on a regime of drugs, certain drugs, that they would be safe and able to function at a limited extent in the overall population. I'm now aware that since that initiative was started, we've released about 80% of what was in the psychiatric community out into the general population. And now what we're seeing, as was mentioned by Jordan Peterson, there is probably 10% of the population that really should be being taken care of in psychiatric institutions. They are incapable of staying off drugs. They are incapable of staying off alcohol. They are incapable of managing their own lives. And they are responsible for a great deal of the criminal activity that's happening in various cities across the country. We really need to look at some of the things that we have humanely thought would be great initiatives. We need to look at some of these experiments in humanity and say, has this really worked? And if it's not really worked, if we've got an extra 10% of the population that's out there and they're really psychiatrically sick and incapable of functioning at any peaceable, reasonable, socially responsible level in the community, they really shouldn't be in the community. But should they be in jail? Probably not. They probably really do belong in a psychiatric institution. And that is the good, healthy, humane thing to do. And we are not there. We are not having this self-reflective perspective on what are we doing and what are we really causing to other people. And it's not good.
Thank you. So you mean those committing these crimes, they are just psychiatric, like it means they have psychological problem, right? And they, rather than putting him in the jail, you said that they should be treated, if I get it
Yes,
correctly.
they should be taken care of. And I'm not saying that it's these people exclusively that are responsible for the activity. The pressure on our immigration system, like I talked to hundreds of students trying to fill one job. I talked to hundreds of students,
Wow.
people that were desperate to work because their funds are running out.
Yep.
And in an extreme situation with extreme pressures, people will turn to illegal activity sometimes simply because they need to live. They're desperate to live. They're desperate to have a house. They're desperate a house over their head, not a house of their own, but
Yeah.
just a place to live so they're not out in the rain,
Yeah.
and a place where, a means of getting food. We've had food banks have to shut down on foreign students because they couldn't service the Canadian people,
Yep.
and our food banks are out of food. We have created desperate situations for many people, and they will take desperate action. We really need to do some self-reflection, and we need to look at what are these policies that we're bringing into place, and how we know now, because these have been actual human experiments in real time, and we know the results, and we should be responding by correcting our means of dealing with these things and our initiatives.
Okay, thank you. So as you are talking about the cost of living, so uh, do you support carbon tax, which is just keep going up? Maybe you saw the pump when you go for fueling your car. So it was just around like 130 or 140. Right now it is over 150 to 160 here in Kitchener, I'm talking about. And before the carbon tax was implemented, I do recall it was just less than $1 per liter, but it is keep going up. Do you think it is all because of like carbon tax, and do you support the carbon tax which is implemented by Trudeau's government?
If I can go around that question a little bit, one of the things I notice, again, out talking with the people, there are people that are in favor of the carbon tax. There are people that are against the carbon tax. There are people that believe strongly that there is climate change. There are people that believe it may be climate change, but there's nothing we can do about it. I think we need to answer the preliminary questions first. And I really think what this country lacks is a strong position on whether or not there is climate change. And I don't think we should be getting our information from any place else but Canada. I think we need to know the Canadian position on climate change, the Canadian position on carbon, and I think that demands that we go back to our academic institutions and our academic authorities, and we have a public conversation about what is climate change, how real is climate change, how real is the carbon initiative, and then only after we know as Canadians and have a chance to publicly hear the evidence and the information, and then we can decide as a people, where do we want to be standing in the world on climate change? I don't think we need to be, oh, pick me, I'll go along with you. I think we need to be independent, conscientious, and making up our own mind and setting our own path on these things. I don't think every country, all the countries on the carbon initiative are really careful about just how Canada is treated in this aspect. I think we need a Canadian opinion and a Canadian position.
So do you think Canada is doing enough more than other countries, like for the carbon emissions, as compared to India, China, and other like these uh, or other third world countries uh, on they are producing more emissions than Canada. Canada is the lowest emission, but our government is keep putting more cap or more price on pollution. Do you think it is injustice with oil and gas sectors or those industries or the people who are just like you cannot use your car, or if you use it you are going to pay more, or you cannot eat your house, if you do you are going to pay more with respect to carbon tax. So don't you think it is not okay?
I think you've come back to my exact statement. There are people out there that are deciding on a global basis with probably very little consideration for the Canadian experience, and they are making rules, and we are adopting them as laws for this country. But they are rules made by other countries in consideration of other countries' difficulties. And again, I say, we do not have a Canadian position, and we do not have a Canadian initiative. We need to look at this issue in the context of what is good for Canada, not what is good for China, not what is good for India, not what is good for the European community. We need to look at this issue as defining and clarifying what the issue is from a Canadian perspective. And then we need to make up our mind as to where we need to be and what we need to do on this issue from a Canadian position.
So just to sum up this one, what you are trying to say, so just to understand clearly, you mean we are just being dictated by another regime or something, just what we are doing right now, but this is not what Canada should do.
I can say for sure that I do not know the specific research and the people behind the research that has gone into defining this issue. And I do know that we have not, well, maybe in a sense we have, but I don't see anywhere where our position has been defined in context of our needs. And I really think it, and in the absence of us choosing our own path and making our own decisions, then somebody else is doing it for us if we're not doing it for ourselves. So in response to your question, no, I don't believe that we have set our own path and that we're ruling ourselves and setting our own direction. I think our direction is being determined and set by other people. And I don't think it's done with a solid consideration of the Canadian experience and the Canadian situation.
Okay, thank you. Just last question. Do you believe right now, since the Trudeau took office, is just keep promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion? Do you believe it is okay to give priority on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, than on merit in private sector and government sector everywhere? And you are a businessman, and you maybe you are being told to just do this and maybe you get subsidies.
Yes. My most recent thoughts on DEI is that we're in a great deal of difficulty with our professional sports teams because the only way to field a winning sports team is to do it on merit. You hire the best players. You don't hire an ethnically equivalent number of people. You don't hire you don't put together sports teams. You don't put together a winning team without looking at merit. So I think if the laws were forced to their inevitable end, we create ourselves an unworkable situation and an embarrassment in public. I've given considerable thought to do we really need the type of legislation we have to get to the objective that we would probably desire? And I'm thinking that a direction we might go would be with legislation that would make zero tolerance for inhumane discrimination against an individual or an identifiable group. And again, I think a lot of the situations that we're looking at that people are trying to apply DEI to are ridiculous. They're absurd. It negates any possibility of a winning team sports-wise. But if we start to look at the humane aspect of it, there are lots of times where the trait or the aspect would be visibly obvious. There's obvious differences in people. And if we honored those, respected them, and treated people humanely, didn't allow inhumane discrimination against those groups or individuals, then I think we would accomplish what we really want to accomplish without creating ridiculous systems that would make every winning team or the potential of any winning team an impossibility. And you can see it, the absurdity of it, you can see it in sports. And if you take that into the work environment, the commercial environment, you'll start to feel the losing team. And that is not what's intended. What we want to do is make sure that people, our people, are treated humanely, regardless of what their situation is.
Just to understand it clearly, so you mean the merit should be first?
The merit should be first, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Dennis, being with me. So what's your message to Toronto St. Paul's residents?
I understand that the number one concern for the constituents in this riding is rent, the ability to pay their rent so that they can continue to have a place to live. And unfortunately, the rent on apartments and how those things are handled, that's a provincial jurisdiction. So as a party, from a federal perspective, can't do much about rent. But from a party perspective and a federal perspective, we can do a lot by making government leaner so that we don't have to charge people as much in tax, and that can put dollars back in their pocket that can make it a little easier to pay the rent. A second aspect of it that concerns me greatly, and we're not hearing it in this campaign, is there is a tremendous underground economy in this country. And that underground economy was created by GST HST. I think we need to look at this aspect of our taxation system to see if it is achieving what it was intended to achieve, and also look at the ramifications that are happening as a result behind the scene, and that is the growth of the underground economy. How many of us are paying double what we would be paying if there was a different way or a better way of handling the GST and HST? That's a tremendous aspect of the economy, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's dealing with it. I don't know. Is it an embarrassment to the people that brought it in place? I don't know. But I do believe it's big enough to get some definite consideration as to what's going on and what can we do to do it better.
Okay, thank you. So what's your message to Toronto St. Paul residents? Why should they vote for you?
Because we are not driven by the party philosophy. Another thing that I'm very much against is social engineering. I think the character of the population should be what's projected by the people, not what's desired by a particular political philosophy. Of course, we have our own philosophy, but our philosophy is include the people more. not engineer the people. I have an objection to social engineering. I honestly do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson, for being with me today.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else you would like to just add up before we wrap up?
No, I've enjoyed talking with you. I enjoyed the questions, and I really hope people will vote for us, make us the alternative party. Look for Wilson Dennis at the bottom of the ticket.
Okay.
Because it's alphabetical.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Very good. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's my fortune.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you again. Hopefully see you. Wish you best of luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.